Welcome to the Fan of History. I am the Fan of History, and I'm gonna give you an overview of the world in 900 BC. This is some of the historical societies of the world. What does it mean to be a historical society? It means that somebody kept a record of what you did. So pre-records, it's prehistory. With records, it's history. So I'm not going to talk too much about North America or Europe, but more about the Middle East and China. This is setting the stage for decade reports. I will talk more about them later. I have done the whole 10th century BC this way, and videos are on this YouTube channel, The Fan of History. Please check them out. In 900 BC, the greatest nation state of the world is the Western Zhou Dynasty of China. For short, we call it China, but it's not really anything resembling today's China. This is still an era where most of our knowledge comes from pottery. The estimation of the world population is about 55 to 60 million people. It is still in the dark age of the Mediterranean world following the Bronze Age collapse. We are seeing cultures coming out of the dark age, but the Bronze Age collapse of 1200 BC is still forming the world in the Eastern Mediterranean. The Old Testament is not considered a reliable source before the reign of Omri, but Omri becomes the king of Israel and actually probably founds Israel. So there are no earlier kings of Israel or Judah in history according to archaeology. But in 884 BC, that is very shortly, we'll start talking about Omri and his son Ahab. Ahab is also mentioned by Shalmaneser III of Assyria in his list of victims at the Battle of Karkar, which we'll talk a lot more about. This is a world map showing the populations. So most people live in the Zhou Dynasty or in the Middle East or in Egypt. One people that we don't know a lot about, this is not a historical society, but I want to mention them because they will launch a major attack on the world in 714 BC. They share the Russian steppe with the Scythians, and the Assyrians of northern Iraq are stealing their horses. We'll talk more about the Cimmerians later. In Europe, there are no nation states. Mycenae is gone. The Villanovans are around as the first culture in Europe, pretty much. And they will become the Etruscans shortly. The Greeks are still in the Dark Age. Phrygians control Macedonia and seem to have quite a party there. I just read about it yesterday actually, but we don't have any records of the area. The Urnfield cultures are in most of Europe, and they're a Bronze Age culture. Iron is still very, very rare, even though this is counted as the Iron Age. In the Middle East, the civilizations are really, really old. Some states are over 2,000 years old at this point. And the Neo-Assyrian Empire, the third empire of Assyria, based from the city of Ashur in northern Iraq, has started in 911 BC, and their goal right now is to reclaim the Middle Assyrian Empire that was lost in the 11th century. This is a raw picture of what is going on in the Middle East. I'll talk more about these states and tribes, but first I want to talk more about Assyria. This is the Assyrian heartland, and as I said, they're going to retake their empire. They have the best soldiers in the world. I made a special video about the Assyrians actually and their history before this in 3000 to 1000 BC. Check it out, it's on this YouTube channel. They have iron, they have more iron than anyone else, and they know how to make iron weapons. Their king is Adad Nirari II, and they will conquer. This is the rise of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Please watch the events of the 910s BC to get a list of Assyria's neighbors, victims and enemies. They happen to be the same. We don't have a picture of Adad Nirari II, sadly. So this is a picture of Ashur, the most important god in the Assyrian pantheon or in the Mesopotamian pantheon, but he's worshipped as the #1 god by the Assyrians. Adad Nirari II is the start of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. He's the first ruler of the empire. He will reign until 891 BC or 892. He is the grandfather of Ashur-nasir-pal, the first truly great king of Neo-Assyria, and is the father of Tukulti-Ninurta II. Adad-nirari II is a competent warrior king that claims many inventions, and the Assyrians are churning out inventions and doing things nobody else have done already at this point. And a lot of things that you think are Persian or Roman, I will prove are Assyrian. The other countries then in the Middle East. Babylon to the south of Assyria here is weak and prone to be a victim of Assyria. They enjoy a special respect from Assyria, and their gods especially enjoy that respect. The Arameans are tribal people that have been causing trouble for hundreds of years, but now they're settling down. They're being assimilated by the Neo-Hittites over here, who still think the Hittite Empire is around, even though it disappeared in the Bronze Age collapse 300 years ago. The Arameans are also being assembled by the Assyrians, and they are assimilated by the Assyrians, and they are also turning to trade from war. So the Arameans are becoming a different thing. The Phrygians control Macedonia, Thrace, and most of Turkey at this point. The Manians will be the first people of the Zagros Mountains here in Iran to actually form a kingdom. It will happen in this century. And some of their subjects are the Medes and the Persians. Urartu is not around, despite what this map says. It is the region of the Nairi, a loose confederation of tribes that will turn into Urartu, a kingdom in this century. Elam is one of the oldest kingdoms in the world, older than Babylon, as old as Sumer. And it's very mysterious. We don't know a lot about what Elam is doing, but they are keeping the tribal people of the Zagros Mountains in check. And they will keep doing so until they have to go up against the Assyrian Empire later in our story. In Egypt, it looks something like this. Egypt did survive the Sea Peoples. In fact, Ramses III defeated the Sea Peoples and stopped the Bronze Age collapse, or at least made somebody survive it in 1200 BC. Egypt as a nation has been around for thousands and thousands of years. The old, middle, and the new kingdom are gone. We're in the 22nd dynasty. This is called the Third Intermediate Period. The Third Intermediate Period of Egyptian history is a mess. But right this year, in 900 BC, Egypt is actually having a good time. There's peace, prosperity, and unity. Egypt has one ruler, but slowly the world is moving into the Iron Age, and Egypt doesn't have any iron, and it doesn't keep up with the times. Egypt is sort of looking back, being nostalgic, thinking, oh, we are Egypt, we will always be the same. They are not keeping up with the times. Osorkon I is the pharaoh of Egypt. He's the second pharaoh of the 22nd dynasty. He did not reign in those years. Sorry about that. He's the son of Shoshenq I. His succession is confused. We don't actually really know when he stopped being the pharaoh. His Egypt is extremely rich, but his tomb has never been found, and it is imagined that Osorkon's tomb will be extremely wealthy, much more wealthier than Tutankhamun's. So it's still a question, is it hidden? Can it be found? Kush, or Nubia, is an old nation state that was controlled by the new kingdom of Egypt, but it's now free. It's growing stronger, and it had 2 fights with Egypt in the 10th century BC. I think the kingdom of Saba, I talked about it in the 1000 BC show, but now I think that it actually did not exist at this time. I'm not sure. Saba is a mystery. In India, people do not write, so it's very hard to know what's going on. Kuru and Panchala are 2 important kingdoms. This is the Vedic times. a lot of important texts are created and then passed on through oral tradition. Hopefully we'll get to talk a little more about India in this century when we discuss the decade shows. The Zhou Dynasty of China is consists of many states, has half of the world's population, and there's a lot to say about the dynasty. Let's look at this. King Ji is the king. The capital is here, Haojing. It's actually a two-part city. There are two cities on each side of the river, and they are both called Fenghao. And it is probably the greatest city in the world at this time. But in the 10th century BC, we had a lot of documentation from China, but we don't. The only thing we know, there's an astronomical event in 899, and we know that King Yi has a very dangerous uncle, Chao, who we will talk more about. The Lapita culture is, they don't have written records, but their feat is so impressive that I have to talk about it. They travel across the Pacific in small raggedy canoes, and they discover most islands, but they fail to find New Zealand. They also don't go to Easter Island, but they travel like the Polynesians will do much later over the Pacific in small boats. The Olmecs are the greatest civilization of the Americas. They are the second major civilization of the New World after the Norte Chico in Peru. They practice ritual bloodletting, and they are surely considered to be the center of the world at this time. Their most important center is in La Venta. It is a cultural center. It is not a capital, really. It's more of a sort of collection of temples. They have created these amazing heads. We have found 17 of these heads. They're bigger than a person. And we know they have writing, but we cannot read it. The Olmecs also do not have the wheel, and they love eating their dogs. And look at this picture. This is like, the poverty point culture is a culture, but they don't have written records. But this is the Olmecs, and look how alone they are. They are like, we are civilized in a world of Stone Age cultures. But right next to them are the Mayans. And they've been around for a long time. This is the Olmec heartland, this is the Maya heartland, so close. So you can imagine that the Maya were heavily influenced by the Olmec. The last culture I want to mention is the Chavin of Peru. This is a very interesting society because it seems to be entirely peaceful. They don't have walls, they have very few weapons. We haven't found any signs of violence in the archaeological record. They don't seem to have writing, at least not at this time, and they seem to spread their influence through inspiration and not violence. People want to be like them, and they will be around for quite some time, so I will spread out some info about the Chavin in the decade shows. So please follow the Fan of History YouTube channel. There will be 12 more videos, at least, maybe more, about the 9th century BC. I will make 10 decade reports. I will make a special about the Battle of Karkar in 853 BC. A battle which is the largest battle that has ever been fought until its date. So at the time it will be the biggest battle ever in the world. Possibly only eclipsed by the start of the Zhou Dynasty in the 1040s, but we'll talk about that when we do the earlier decades. I will also do a special about the early Neo-Assyrian army and why it was so formidable and why it won all the time. There might be other special episodes if I get inspired. If you like this, if you subscribe, like and share, I get motivated and do more things. Please discuss the show with me on YouTube or on Facebook. And if you like this, please, as I said, share it, like it, subscribe. I will be inspired and do more things. And I thank you for watching. I thank you for your appreciation. And please stay with me when I discuss the 9th century BC in 12 more videos.